Captainmidnight.
This video is brought to you by Adam and Eve. Use the link in the description and code MIDNIGHT to get 50% off one item and free shipping in the US and Canada. Some exclusions apply. I'm sure it's hard to complain too much about being on a well-loved, long-running TV show. It helps make you a household name, it's years of job security, and often decades of residual checks. It seems like a great gig. But with all that success can also come a downside, the result of being so intrinsically linked to one character forever, typecasting. I think Hollywood has gotten better and more understanding about this through the years, but it can still be an undeniable factor in the casting process. So I've always been interested in actors that could easily fall into this trap and how they work to avoid it. Which is why today I want to talk about Parks and Recreation's Aubrey Plaza, and how fascinating I've found her work in recent years. Specifically, her attempts, some successful and others less so, to create some distance between herself as an actor and April Ludgate as a persona in her choice of roles. The tension between giving the audience more of the type of performances they've come to expect and want from you, versus the desire to push forward creatively and do new, unexpected things. So one actor I kept thinking about while putting together this video was one of the most famously typecast ever, 60s Batman Adam West. That may seem like a strange comparison at first, but I think West and Aubrey Plaza may have more in common than it might appear at first glance. Both were really excellent deadpan comedy performers, even if how they approached that deadpan was radically different. They both had the ability to take dialogue, play it perfectly straight, and turn it into comedic gold. That ability served them very well on their shows, but I think it also made it difficult for viewers to not see those beloved characters doing a bit when they're in other roles. Something that haunted Adam West his whole career. At one point, he described trying to get producers to cast him as like going up against a brick wall, because there was such a built-in assumption that the audience would only see him as Batman. Now, Aubrey Plaza has never had to put up with that level of typecasting. It's not the 60s anymore, and Parks and Rec never came close to reaching the heights of that decade's Batmania, but it's still a role that was going to be really hard to overcome in a lot of ways. For one, she's great as April, and is one of that show's biggest standouts. Parks and Rec is known for having a first season that feels like a different show from what it eventually evolved into, but April Ludgate seemed locked in from the very start, fitting seamlessly into both the droll, cynical show that it was in season 1 and the far more feel-good sitcom that it would evolve into. And during that time, Plaza didn't have any issue leaning into this persona, making it clear on talk shows and podcasts that while she's not April Ludgate, her natural sense of humor and personality were not too far off from the character that made her famous. You can see a lot of shades of that performance in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and Funny People, both released during the show's run. And during that time, she seemed to be modulating a similar performance in different roles. Even the indie romantic dramedy Safety Not Guaranteed saw her stick pretty close to this range, if a little more earnest. And I'm not complaining really, I think she's good in these movies. Now, there is one role from that time where she's pretty far from April, is the very funny Donald Glover-led indie comedy Mystery Team, where she seems honestly a lot less impactful and not as comfortable on camera as the very straightforward love interest who just lost her parents. With the success of April and those late 2000s, early 2010s roles, it makes sense that she'd embrace the Ludgate-esque roles during that time. Even going so far as to play Daria, the deadpan and sarcastic animated character Plaza is often compared to, for a College Humor short in 2013. It's really the ultimate "this is who you would typecast Aubrey Plaza as" role. But after Parks wrapped up, I think you see something pretty interesting. You see her do a few studio comedies in Dirty Grandpa and Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. In decades past, it's easy to envision her as having a super successful career like right in that wheelhouse, making that same jump from comedy TV actor to movie star that produced so many huge names through the years. But this wasn't 1999 or even 2009. This was the back half of the 2010s, and the studio comedy wasn't dead, but it was on life support, rapidly heading that direction. Even the biggest comedy stars were becoming less surefire hits, with movies like The House becoming the lowest opening of Will Ferrell's career, Melissa McCarthy losing her heat at the box office with flops like The Happy Time Murders and Life of the Party. Of course, in 2014, Adam Sandler signed a $250 million 4-picture deal with Netflix and got out of the live-action theatrical comedy entirely, seemingly predicting what was about to happen in the genre in theaters at just the right time. I could spend all day on the collapse of the studio comedy, but the point is, these reliable comedy star roles were drying up fast. And while Aubrey Plaza will probably always be known for comedy, she started making more and more headway into other genres here. Probably at least in part because movies like Mike and Dave weren't going to be around much longer, at least not in that form. Being able to play variations of her well-known persona in big movies was just looking less and less likely. Not that that's necessarily what she wanted anyway. On a panel in 2022, Plaza talked about how she approached typecasting, saying, "I don't mind being typecast because I feel like I was so lucky to be on Parks and Recreation. And that was one of my first really big jobs, and I'm so heavily associated with that character. I think there were years when I was on that show where I was like only getting offered those kind of parts, and that's just what happened. You do something, people respond to it, and they want to see you do it again, and again. I think you just have to be really proactive in changing that narrative for yourself. It gave me motivation to prove myself." I think that quote gives us some insight into Plaza's career shakeup in 2017 with a couple of big roles. First, the comedic drama Ingrid Goes West. Now, this was not a huge movie, even by Neon-released indie standards. It was positively reviewed at the time, but I don't get the sense that it's really lingered in the popular imagination like many A24 or Neon-released movies from that time have. But I think it's pretty essential to establishing a real path forward for the type of performances Aubrey Plaza would begin to excel at. The movie is about a depressed, mentally ill young woman from a small town in Pennsylvania, played by Plaza, who becomes completely obsessed with an LA Instagram influencer played by Elizabeth Olsen, to the point where she moves across the country to insert herself into that influencer's life however she can. While I find some of the satire in the film to be a little too obvious, I think Plaza is pretty damn great here. In Parks and Rec, April's sarcastic, disinterested attitude helps her seem smart, cool, and above it all, even if it is hiding a deeply caring, kind person. But with Ingrid, aspects of that performance are present, but they don't read the same. That natural, deadpan tone doesn't feel like confidence. It feels like something the character is trapped in, desperately wanting to escape, trying hard to recreate herself as the light, airy, and effortlessly fun persona that Olsen's influencer character projects out into the world, and failing. I think it helped unlock a new part of Plaza's acting toolbox. That instead of her detached delivery being the product of quick wit and a cooler-than-you persona, it was instead hiding a fountain of insecurity and repressed emotion. It still feels like an Aubrey Plaza performance. She isn't running away from the things that she does well, but she's using them to very different ends. That same year brought us the FX Marvel series Legion, where Plaza was given a lot of room to shine. It let her paint on a very large canvas, encompassing stuff in her usual wheelhouse and pretty far outside of it. And, lots of dancing. There's a lot of people out there who love Legion much more than me, and I understand why. Especially as a Marvel-related project, it really stands out. I don't always think it hung together, and the show has a tendency to neglect more subtle aspects of developing its characters in favor of leaning on stylish, attention-grabbing moments, especially as it went on. But it is a good acting showcase for Plaza, who is able to go big and work in so many different modes here, often very dark and very funny. And, despite my own issues with the show, if any of this seems up your alley, I definitely check it out. People who get into this one tend to really love it. So since 2017, she's continued working constantly, being in everything from Crank Yankers to The Simpsons. But I kind of want to hone in on a few projects that I think highlight what she can do extremely well, and the performances that show how I believe she can be poorly utilized as an actor. Let's get that more negative part out of the way first. So the initial idea for this video actually came to me while I was watching the long-delayed Guy Ritchie film Operation Fortune on an airplane, starring Jason Statham as Orson Fortune, a cool spy who does cool spy stuff. The movie is a real 2000s throwback. It's got a fun cast, including Hugh Grant as a total sleazeball, and a pre-Oppenheimer Josh Hartnett as a clueless movie star. And it was an all-around solid plane movie. Aubrey Plaza, though, plays Sarah, a cool hacker with a kind of antagonistic and flirty relationship with the Statham character, who also happens to be really good at shooting a pistol one-handed in a high-speed car chase. And while the movie is a bit tongue-in-cheek, and hiring Plaza does bring some laughs, it's hard to shake the feeling that she's pretty out of place, or maybe more accurately, that she feels like she's in a comedy sketch mocking movies that would have a cliché hacker character like this. And I think her performance in Child's Play suffers from the same thing. That's the very uninspired 2019 movie reboot, not Chucky, the likable recent show. Apparently the rights are split up now or something. Anyway, she plays the mom in a horror movie in Child's Play. That's it. There's not a lot to talk about there. And it kind of has that same feeling as her performance in Operation Fortune, while not being nearly as fun of a movie. I think with characters this stock and thinly sketched, Plaza can have an issue. That when she's going through this very routine material with her natural sensibility, it can read as really insincere and flat. And I really don't think she's trying to make fun of these movies or anything. In Operation Fortune interviews, she speaks very earnestly about wanting to prove herself in the action and thriller genres. I think she's fully capable of that, but not in roles that don't tap into the things that make her unique as an actor. Now, one dramatic role that really did was Harper, her character in season 2 of White Lotus that was written specifically for her by series creator Mike White. It's a character that harkens back to a lot of what she was doing on Ingrid Goes West, but in a much more complex role. Harper is all pent-up frustration, anger, and desperation. White Lotus is a show that really thrives on depicting miserable marriages and dead-end relationships, and it's able to use Plaza's deadpan persona to those ends really perfectly, creating a character that feels in line with April Ludgate in some ways, but is far more seething, with so much rage and vulnerability projected just under the surface. It also helps that the show is still pretty funny too. And then finally, we come to Emily the Criminal. And I'm gonna be honest, like I said this whole video, I think Aubrey Plaza is great at what she does, but I didn't know that she had this performance in her. It seems like a more successful break into maybe the kind of thing she was trying to do in Operation Fortune. This is a thriller, it doesn't lean much on her existing deadpan persona, and she plays a very openly volatile character, and I think she nails it. And it's also not in that really high concept way where she's playing someone really off the wall or creepy or wacky like she did well in Legion. She's playing a normal person just under a lot of distress here. And that could come off as pretty disastrous if it felt like April Ludgate just getting faux angry. But to Plaza's credit, I think she really carries it. And while I'm sure she will continue to do comedic work similar to what she's done in the past, in a way, this movie almost feels like a new chapter for her. Like White Lotus was the culmination of her 2010s comedic persona, pushing it to its limits and turning it on its head. And Emily the Criminal was a statement that she could move past that she can play a character with no layer of deadpan irony and pull it off. I'm excited to see where she goes from here, and with upcoming roles in Francis Ford Coppola's self-funded new film, and an Ethan Coen of the Coen Brothers movie on the horizon, I think it could be really interesting. Aubrey Plaza built her comedy brand on being too cool to care, but if there's one thing I really respect about her career, it's that she continues to grow and experiment. Sure, there's some roles she takes that she could do in her sleep, like the Grumpy Cat TV movie. And honestly, she could have kept cashing in on that same kind of thing for the rest of her career. I don't think anyone would have blamed her. But she didn't settle for that. And, I think that's pretty admirable.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.